And welcome to everybody who's joining us on the call today. For our presentation, I'm going to provide a big picture overview of some of the general issues around cloud security and then drill into some of the specific issues for Office 365. Then Michael will come on to talk about Avanan and what their solution does to bolster the Office 365 security stack. And then finally, we'll leave some time for Q&A. So type those questions into the console as they occur to you, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the session. So SaaS security. Let's start with a stroll down memory lane. When you own the data center. Before the cloud, you owned everything. You owned the users, you owned the data, you owned the security. Everything was 100% your responsibility. You were responsible for protecting against all attackers, all malware, all spam. You're responsible for compliance with any regulations in your industry and for auditing. So now I'm going to assume that if you're on this call, you're either on Office 365 or you're thinking seriously about it, and you're in good company up on that platform. Microsoft came out with their earnings last week, and they didn't give specific numbers, but educated guess is that they're in the range of 125 to 130 million active monthly commercial users on Office 365. Add on another maybe 30 million consumers, and that's a lot of people up on Office 365. By some other estimates, it's probably about a third of their Exchange user base is on Office 365 already. So once you've made that jump to the cloud, whether it's Office 365 or Azure or Salesforce or any other SaaS or infrastructure as a service, what's different? For one thing, you no longer own the servers. While it's your data, it's their servers and it's their security. And the question becomes, now that everything has moved to the cloud, is everything entirely, the cloud provider's responsibility? And the truth of the matter is this: while your IT may be 100% moved to the cloud, your security responsibility is not completely transferred to the cloud provider. So this is why the industry has developed the shared responsibility model. It's the dividing line between what you're paying the cloud provider to do versus what continues to be your responsibility. It's a framework that lets you draw, or that draws a clear line between their job and your job. And they may not always make it clear up front, especially when they're selling you the service, but it's clearly defined in the service level agreements. So the level of responsibility depends upon the service that you're buying. So to the left, for example, if you're getting infrastructure as a service from Azure or AWS, they're responsible for the uptime and security of their physical hardware, their network, storage, servers, and basically all the layers below the hypervisor, which you can see there in the I guess it's a magenta on my screen. So in the middle there, as you're looking at platform as a service or PaaS, services like Azure, you can see that that shaded area is moving up the stack quite a bit. A lot more of the components are the provider's responsibility. Now today what we're really talking about is SaaS, and that's the one on the right there. So if you're getting a SaaS service like Office 365 or Salesforce or Slack chat, the provider takes on more of the responsibility. But even then, they're not taking 100%. They're responsible for everything up to their apps, but the shared responsibility model makes it clear that you're still responsible for your data and you're still responsible for your own users. So where the shared responsibility model is made really clear is in the service level agreements that you sign when you create an account. You may not have read all the details, but in essence, this is what they all say. It's consistent across the industry. So if you see all the bold text, you've basically got a lot of variations on you are responsible. If your users do something bad, if they share confidential information, if they lose a password, or if someone logs in and does something malicious like spread malware, not only is it your responsibility, it could be grounds for their terminating your account. Another way to think about it is something that I once heard about Microsoft, which is that they consider customer data toxic waste, internally, or at least they did at one point. So they really didn't want to see it. They didn't want to see your emails. They didn't want to see your passwords, any of that stuff. They didn't want to touch it. Their job was basically to move it through their pipes, and that stuff was yours. And they weren't responsible for what's inside or what it's used for. So if you've moved your data to the cloud, but if you've moved your data to the cloud, but if you're still responsible for your data and for your users, then what are you supposed to be doing? So what we've got here is a framework from Gartner. So if users and data are your responsibility, what does that mean technically? And in this framework from Gartner for SaaS security describes the steps that you need to take in order to really take ownership of these levels and the technology that you need to apply at each layer. So first, you'll notice that they not only recommend that you take responsibility for the user and data layers, but that you also monitor the application layer of the SaaS. So while you don't need to dig into the OS or server or physical layers, and in fact, with a lot of services you can't, you need to audit the cloud app that you're paying for. So at the data layer, you'll recognize most of the tools because they're the same technologies that you deployed in your own data center. Antivirus, DLP, encryption, auditing, policy reporting. These should be familiar. And when you own the hardware, these are the tools that you deployed on your servers or on your perimeter. So Gartner recommends that your data requires these tools even when they are in the cloud. But if you don't own the servers, how can you deploy these controls? So Microsoft is a special case because they blur the line between the shared responsibility model and what most SaaS providers offer. They offer security tools, above their applications. They've done this primarily to overcome the original customer hesitations to move to the cloud. They needed to tell their customers that the users and data were the customer's responsibility. But especially in the early days, there weren't really tools to actually take ownership, of that responsibility. So very early on, they offered spam and later anti-phishing filters, in their email by default. And they began subscribing to the large antivirus services to filter mail. And eventually, signature-based antivirus was not enough, and sandboxing became the minimum level of protection for zero-day attacks. So Microsoft began offering their advanced threat protection as an additional add-on. And of course, these weren't enough to solve every security problem. So to differentiate their services, they began offering additional tools. And you've probably seen this slide before, at least the top portion about the different SKUs of Office 365. So while there's tremendous difference between the various Office 365 accounts when it comes to the applications they include, they also differ in the level of security controls, at each level. So by default, every Microsoft account comes with basic spam filter and signature-based antivirus scanning. For customers that need, greater security, the E3 and E5 accounts offer additional capabilities. So they offer greater protection for email and the ability to encrypt files with individual access controls. For any company that deals with personally identifiable information, data classification and data loss prevention are both vital. And you'll notice that there are basic and advanced versions of both depending on your company's needs. Again, 10 years ago, signature-based antivirus was the minimum level of security to prevent malware. But now you're seeing almost every attack is some sort of zero-day attack. So malware sandboxing has become a minimum industry standard to prevent malware. This is why Microsoft offers this advanced threat protection sandboxing for basic accounts, even though it adds another 25% to the monthly user cost. You see there, like in the E1, it's $8, but at the bottom, the APT is an additional $2. One added complication is that this matrix of security services is constantly changing. Microsoft has an Office 365 roadmap, and a lot of the items on that roadmap relate to security features that are coming any day to the Office 365 service. So, for example, there's an attack simulator for Office 365 threat intelligence public preview that's coming. That's going to let admins launch like 10 to 15 simulated attacks like phishing and root password cracking against their own users to test their users' education and situational awareness. Another example of something that's coming down the pike on security is updates to the Secure Score, which is a Microsoft tool for rating an organization's Office 365 security posture on something like a 273-point scale. It's kind of complicated. But improvements will be an industry average and an active seat average score. So you can start comparing your results to similar organizations to yours. But so, security, if security and user behavior and compliance remains our responsibility, are the components on this slide in these three suites enough? Even if we pay for the E5 level of security at $35 per user per month, will it secure our users and our data? The first thing that we have to do is realize that Microsoft is a services company, not a security company. It's in the business of providing you Office apps that your users need to make your business run. The primary responsibility and what most of the service level agreement is about. When it comes to security, you have to realize that it's not Microsoft's core business, and its SLA makes that clear. And if you're in an industry that regulates data or user compliance, it's still your responsibility, even if you subscribe to the most advanced Office 365 accounts. So let's do a little gap analysis. If we look at the framework for SaaS security controls again, we can see that it's possible to add the additional layer of protection, but at a cost. We then have to ask the question, when we purchase these security layers from Microsoft, is it worth the price? Are we getting the technology we need? Are we getting the best security technology for our money? There are other sandboxing tools on the market, and many of them have advanced AI or cutting-edge machine learning capabilities. Are they better than what Microsoft offers? And is it worth the additional cost, or is it actually less expensive because you don't have to jump up a SKU that might have a lot of other features that you don't really need? So we also have to remember that even though we're talking about Office 365, we may also have deployed other SaaS applications for our business. In fact, if you're like most businesses, you've probably got dozens of SaaS applications installed, throughout the company. So most other SaaS offerings don't have any of the security controls that Microsoft does. And if you pay for the Microsoft versions of, say, sandboxing and DLP, they don't apply to any of the other SaaS that you've deployed. So is it worth paying for tools that only apply in Office 365 when you've got these other applications to protect? I'll give one last example here, too, before I turn things over to Michael, just about how complex these questions get between Microsoft's constant improvement of the product features, the limitations of some of Microsoft's early release functionality, and then what's available from third parties. So, one of the things that Gartner recommends is that organizations use PAM, or Privileged Access Management, which helps ensure that power users like admins have more stringent control on their accounts. Microsoft offers something here. It's called Azure ID Privileged Identity Management. So you can upgrade to that for more money. But the Azure solution doesn't include auditing yet, which is a key feature. So here's where the roadmap comes in. Basic audit history is in a preview mode. So that core function is coming. But if you want full auditing, more sophisticated auditing, you need a third-party PAM tool. So I think that example just really brings home how many moving pieces there are here. So now just to recap on the main takeaways from this portion. First, it's our responsibility to secure our users and our data, even after we move them to the cloud. Second, if we're going to deploy security technology, do we want to purchase them from Microsoft or look elsewhere? And then third, while we're looking, we should consider that we might have SaaS beyond Office 365. And now to answer some of those questions, I'm going to turn things over to Michael.
Well, thanks a lot, Scott. And hello, everyone. My name is Michael Londaway. I'm a co-founder of Avanan, the cloud security platform. And I'm going to try to address the questions that Scott brought up. And basically, first, how do you complete the security stack in Office 365? And then, if we treat Microsoft as two different companies, an application, a SaaS company providing Office 365, and then separately as a security company, Microsoft Security, should we be buying it from Microsoft, or like Scott asked, should we look elsewhere? And then, of course, big picture question, should we be talking about security for Office 365 or security for all of our cloud? And that is, of course, both SaaS and infrastructure as a service. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our company, Avanan, the cloud security platform. Our motto is any cloud, any security, one click. And essentially, our goal is to give you a choice so that when you deploy in the cloud, you have a choice to go beyond the default vendor's security. To actually, instead of have a choice of one, have a choice of actually the entire security industry to secure your cloud. Just to, in brief, and I'll go into more detail about how we work, we are a cloud-based security platform, and we connect via API to whatever SaaS or infrastructure as a service you're using. So in this case, Office 365. Because we connect via API, there is no need to redirect traffic. There's no gateway, no agent. Your users connect directly to Office 365, and we connect exclusively to the cloud. Now, the Avanan platform offers multiple security layers so that we can actually deploy for Office 365 or any SaaS multiple types of security, multiple layers of security from multiple vendors. And then offer you the benefit of being able to manage policy not just across Office 365, giving reporting tools and policy controls above and beyond what Microsoft offers, but being able to apply those controls everywhere. So just to dig a little bit deeper into how we do it, first, I mentioned we connect the API. We're completely out of band. This makes it, first, very quick to deploy, but it also is important because it applies to all devices. Because we are connecting directly, your users can use whatever app, whatever device, be it the web or a phone app to connect, and it's invisible to them. There's no change in their experience. But I think the key value is this, is that once we connect to Office 365, we're able to deploy cloudified versions of the industry's best tools for whatever layer of security you'd like to deploy. What we've done is we've taken their core engine and created zero configuration versions of them. So there's no need to manage the individual tools. They are all managed within our environment. So one click, you can deploy DLP. One click, you can deploy sandboxing. One click, you can deploy any type of malware protection. What this does is first make them interchangeable. So you can compare them side by side, pick the best one, and then choose one today, but maybe a year from now discover that there is another company, another vendor that actually provides better security. So this makes it future-proof. So when I say we offer a full stack of security, it's because we have chosen the best vendors from each of the different categories of the security you're familiar with, from phishing to malware sandboxing, DLP, encryption, access control, all the way down to SIM integration or compliance enforcement. What this does is allow you to pick and choose those layers in which you find a gap. So you might choose Microsoft sandboxing and not need to add to that, or you can replace it with one of the sandboxing tools from all the major vendors. And one of the reasons we can say best of breed is because we partner with the best. In fact, my role within Avanan is to seek out the best in each one of those categories. In fact, before we add a vendor to our platform, we actually compare it with what we already have. Now, this becomes important when, for example, for signature-based antivirus, many of them are using the same back-end signature databases. So there may be no net value to adding that. In fact, because we deploy within Office 365, deploy within Google, for example, that have their own layers of protection, our goal is to ensure that anything we add to our platform adds a net value over the default security within the cloud environment. And so this is kind of a screenshot of what I mean by one click, in that we can connect to any SaaS. You can see them along the left-hand side there from Box, Office, and we actually split up Office so people can have a choice to deploy just for Office email, for Office OneDrive. And so you can actually pick and choose and turn services on and off as you please, so that you can deploy anti-phishing, for example, just on email, but you could actually deploy it within a file engine so we can search for threats that might travel through another channel. And the reason why having these multiple layers is important is just the fact that there is no such thing as better security technology. No single technology can catch everything. Really, what we're wanting to do is add multiple layers, each with different types of technology, really just to up the ante, to ask, can a hacker bypass multi-layer protection? There are tools out there that can get by sandboxing. There are tools out there that already know the latest signatures and can pass by the signature-based system, which is why the new AI malware detection using machine learning is so valuable, or active content analysis. So it's actually true that Microsoft Security, just the default that you get in the E1 service, does a fantastic job of filtering out a lot of the noise. But what's important is that those things that Microsoft can't catch, the rest of the industry can. In fact, we see that in our analysis. And again, I never say there's one technology is better than another. We see here that in this environment, that malware sandboxing caught more than any other technology. Of all the malware that went through this environment, 79% was caught by the sandboxing tool. That's great. That's actually better than any of the other capabilities. But the point is that 79% is not good enough. And we can see that if we add an additional technology, this predictive AI using machine learning, it actually catches up to 98%, which is fantastic. But as you see, there's no such thing as quantity. It's actually more a matter of quality, in that by adding behavior analysis and anomaly detection, while it may not catch as much, it catches those things that the others missed. So it catches the hard things that you might not get with a single layer of security. So I think it makes sense when it comes to why you might want to deploy additional layers of security over Microsoft's default. But when it comes to adding a third-party DLP capability, while Microsoft offers its own DLP system to searching for credit card numbers, social security numbers, and so on, there are a number of different regulatory reasons that you might want to deploy something a little bit more advanced. In fact, it may not even be a question of whether Microsoft's DLP is capable of matching against certain criteria or certain regulatory regimes. It's just that you might have already deployed a certain brand of DLP within your data center or across your network. And so given the fact that a DLP is something that needs to be managed, you may not want to manage two different flavors of DLP, one for those in your data center, one for in your cloud, or one for another SaaS entirely. So the ability to deploy the same flavor, the same brand of DLP in the cloud as you would in your own data center gives you a lot of flexibility. In fact, what's nice is that if you deploy, for example, Symantec, or a cloud version of Symantec, it's exactly the same Symantec you're running in your data center, to the point where we can actually connect that to your existing manager so that you can seamlessly manage DLP policies in the cloud from the manager you're using in your data center. Now, if you haven't deployed DLP or data classification within your network, and you can pick and choose at will, one thing that's nice about our platform is that you can actually compare them side by side. So you can compare Microsoft's DLP capabilities alongside Symantec's or Checkpoint's, or in this case, GP's. And each of them are better than the other when it comes to maybe a certain capability, certain technology. For example, one might have OCR capabilities that's necessary for healthcare files and so on. So this ability to pick and choose allows you to either make the DLP you use in the cloud compatible with what you're already using, or make sure it truly is the best for what you're using, you need to use in your industry. So another layer of technology that we offer is our anti-phishing technology. Now, this is something that is unique to Avanan, and the reason I say this is that we have access to pretty much the entire security industry when it comes to identifying the best in each category. And when it came to phishing, phishing is the big fear, it's the big problem that people come to us with, especially when it comes to the cloud. And while we have a number of anti-phishing vendors that do a fantastic job, there were still things that were getting through, which is why we actually developed our own layer of anti-phishing we call SmartPhish. And the key to it is that it was specifically designed to identify phishing threats, not just anywhere. You couldn't apply this in your data center. It's for those threats that get through Microsoft, that get through Gmail, that get through cloud-based mail programs, because they already have their default security. And when we deploy, we actually monitor mail between the default security and the user's inbox. So we see it before the user does. We have developed this AI, machine learning system, to catch what Microsoft doesn't. There are a few key benefits there. One, not only do we monitor inbound, outbound, but we also are able to monitor internal messages that actually might be missed by the outbound-facing security. But the reason why we can do a better job is that we dig deep into the user's mailbox to look through their history. So on day one, we go back in time through the user's history to develop a profile of that individual user, as well as a profile of the company itself. So we know who talks to whom. We see the different roles. And so we actually build an engine unique to each customer based upon that profile. So we actually have hundreds more indicators per email that goes much farther beyond than what's actually in that individual file. And then combining it with all the different security tools when it comes to sandboxing attachments or other anti-phishing capabilities, we can actually catch those things that others don't. Now, again, don't want to say better, but I think the most important reason why this cloud-based anti-phishing is important is the fact that people are moving beyond email when it comes to communication. Now, your users are probably very well trained. Don't trust email. So when they need to send a password or a credit card number or something, they actually would never use email, but they might trust Slack or Teams or an internal communication channel that they give a little bit more trust. Because we protect any SaaS, we can actually provide those same malware scanning, DLP scanning, and phishing tools with other communication channels beyond just email. So even though Office 365 does offer email security, again, it all comes down to layers. So whereas there is a checkbox that says Microsoft offers security for email, digging deeper into the micro layers, we can see that it is possible to build a much more secure email security stack on the Avanan platform. So I also want to introduce another capability that's beyond that basic checklist, the basic checklist in the data section, but more in the user section. So this is user behavior that is normally unmonitored by any SaaS, including Microsoft. And the big fear here is account takeover or insider threat or just loss of control of an individual account within your environment. And because we have visibility, not only in real time to every user, every event, every file, but also historically, we can look back in time or identify in real time compromised accounts or previous breaches and monitor user activity not just in one SaaS, but across all SaaS. Give it a visibility that for an insider threat that wouldn't be possible from the viewpoint of an individual SaaS provider. One of the things that we're looking for when we are identifying account takeover is insecure configurations. So this goes beyond just what the user is doing, but also just the state of the cloud itself. So we may not even assign a maliciousness of the activity so much as see that there's a configuration that might lead to an insecure event. So, you know, as straightforward as just confidential information that's been identified as confidential being put into a shared environment. Someone inadvertently clicks on a button that shares it. Whether that person's malicious or doing it accidentally, we're not trying to assign blame so much as identify a risky rule. Or someone's forwarding their email to their personal account. Not only is that may be against your policy, but it's obviously a very risky thing to do. It's also what a malicious person might do. So when we identify these insecure and malicious configurations, we can identify not only instantaneously, but also historically, and then follow a trail to identify a breached account. So going beyond the user and the data, we go to the big picture, and that is the management of all of this, policy orchestration. So we're connected to Office 365, we're connected to SaaS, and each of those have their own tool set for setting policy, each individually managed. But one, that may not be scalable when it comes to deploying policy within your IT environment, but there may be policies that you want to apply across your SaaS, or more importantly, there might be policies that you would like to apply but can't be applied given the tool sets inherent in the environment. And this is where our deep integration with each SaaS gives you the ability to centralize policy, normalize information, and then actually integrate that with your data center, your IT team, so that you can actually report and manage the cloud as if it were just another data center in your environment. So let's go back over that framework that Scott introduced earlier. Now, when it comes to these best practices, there are a bunch of checkboxes here. And it's very important that for user security, data security, and app monitoring, that we check all those boxes, and may even dig deeply into some of those checkboxes to actually compare whether that each layer of that technology is being best served. So what I described is that when we are asking the question, how do we secure Office 365? Do we purchase additional security from Microsoft, the security company, or do we purchase it from essentially the rest of the security industry? Because of our platform can give you security at all layers, it is the best way to secure Office 365, to complete that security stack. In fact, even if you do decide to use the E5 full-level security and not choose those on the Avanan platform, we give you the ability to go beyond Office 365 and fill that security stack on any cloud. Should be using SaaS outside of Office 365. So, in conclusion, Avanan offers the ability to complete your cloud security stack. Because we can do that via API and do that so quickly, we can offer something that very few others can. And that is the ability to check the status, check your SaaS quickly, easily, without the need for interrupting your users' normal day. Something we're offering to everyone on this webinar is a 10-minute health check. Now, I say 10 minutes, not because that's how long it'll take. Obviously, you probably have a lot more data. It'll take longer to scan, but it takes 10 minutes to set up. And we can scan your Office 365 or other environment for zero-day malware, historical or current, maybe old phishing mails or old attachments, or more historical breaches, configurations that demonstrate that account has already been taken over. In fact, that is probably the service we offer more than anything, is that when we connect to new customers' accounts, we find probably more than they'd hoped for when it comes to account takeover. So what I'd like to do is offer that and then move on to questions if we have any. So, Scott?
Yeah, Michael, that's great. We've got quite a few questions, and I just want to say I like the way that you described Microsoft as, viewing them as two companies. That's an interesting way to go about it, viewing them as an application company and then also a security company. So one of the first questions here comes from Beatrice. She asks, is Avanan available to single-user offices with small footprints? I'm a solopreneur developing my brand and keep my data in the cloud and want good security.
So that's a great question. We have primarily sold to large enterprise, Fortune 100 banks or hospitals, governments, and so on. Because they were kind of the first to need those levels of security. But we have learned that there are a lot more people in SMB, and we're coming out this quarter with an SMB targeted product. And the real problem we had originally was that these tools that we get from third parties can be expensive, and their licensing model didn't allow us to price for small business. But we've worked hard with them, and we're coming out with an SMB tool that is actually price competitive for as small as a few people in a small office. So absolutely, we will be offering that starting in April.
Starting in April? Okay, great. Next question comes from Bob, who is wondering, does Avanan protect Office 365 Business Premium or only E-type licenses?
Actually, any Office 365 account, so you don't necessarily need an E-type. It's just made for an easier comparison, but absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Next up, we have one from Mark, who asks, what's the difference between the AI and machine learning versus behavior analysis, anomaly detection controls?
Absolutely, yes. Good question. So they're used in different ways. One is in analyzing the user. So when we connect, we look back through all user events and identify their not only the normal behavior of that individual, but the normal behavior of their environment. But when it comes to that, so that's about analyzing the user. We also use machine learning to analyze files and looking for active content, looking for and also for phishing, looking for not as signatures, but looking for indicators and comparing those indicators and weighing those indicators. Hoping that answers the question.
Okay, yeah. And I would assume part of the difference, too, that Mark is getting at, when you're grouping the AI and machine learning, that's going to sort of algorithmically look through for issues where it might not be something a human would recognize, whereas the behavior analysis and anomaly detection would be more sort of rules-based, and you're sort of setting things about like what time somebody's necessarily logging in a normal instance or where they're logging in from. Would that be correct as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the difference between hard and fast rules. You tend to get false positives. In fact, I would actually say that most of our machine learning is used to eliminate the false positives. So we're weighing normal behavior with because what we found is that people do abnormal things every single day. We need to identify whether it's malicious.
Gotcha. Let's see. Arthur has a question. Can Avanan discover all SaaS apps that are in use?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually didn't cover the full security stack, but part of what we do is what you would kind of call the CASB or shadow IT or shadow SaaS capability. In fact, we do that in a couple of different ways. One, we've partnered with all the major firewall vendors. So we actually we're an entirely cloud-based system. However, we can connect to your perimeter firewall to monitor all traffic in and out and identify the SaaS that your users are using. We did that because we didn't want to have to redirect all of your traffic through our proxy or a whole other device, because you're already sending it through your firewall that can give us the data we need. We also look for shadow SaaS. So that's beyond just the SaaS that people are using from your environment, but also SaaS that they're connecting your Office 365 environment to other cloud services. So, when you give LinkedIn access to all your contacts, you're connecting one SaaS to another. Now, it's also possible that they might share, they might turn on an app that's a graphing app. That's another SaaS that might actually be malicious, and so we monitor those as well. So we also have some capabilities beyond that at the API level that gives us the ability to look for people that are using SaaS not from your environment, not from your business, but also doing that from home. So the short answer is yes.
Okay. All right, great. The question is any performance hit when saving / adding content in real time?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. And no, when it comes to we do everything we do in parallel, so you can add additional security without adding additional latency. And in fact, so let's say you are uploading a file. When you upload a file to Office or Google Drive or Dropbox, there is a so-called sync time. So you upload, and then it becomes available within the cloud or within your desktop app. And so our scans are typically less than the sync time. So when you upload it, we actually hold that file so that it won't be shared until it's scanned. And so by the time we get to that next sync cycle, our scan time is less than the typical delay that's already there, inherent in your cloud environment. We also, the answer is no. It's unnoticeable at best.
Okay. Question from Debbie who asks, is Avanan a FedRAMP approved vendor?
So absolutely, or I'd put a caveat to that in that, one, we can deploy in a FedRAMP environment. So all of our systems will. Most of our partners are certified for federal environments. There are certain configurations that may not be, but obviously we work with our customers to ensure that we can be.
Okay. Another one here, can I deploy this in Europe?
That's a great question. And so, yes, kind of in the same way that we can deploy our systems within a FedRAMP environment, we can also deploy all of our infrastructure within the European Union. We can also monitor data to make sure that it's GDPR compliant.
Okay. All right. Can I use Microsoft Security in yours at the same time?
Absolutely. In fact, we would recommend that. One, because Microsoft offers more security than most people by default. So even if you're using the basic Microsoft security, then we do not want to replace that. In fact, we take advantage of it so that when you add security on our platform, you're actually adding security. We've never asked you to replace security. We do have customers that do have the advanced threat protection turned on. And so that's another layer. Others have decided that they can use that money for advanced threat protection and actually use it for another vendor that they believe it offers a better protection. So yes, absolutely. We actually treat Microsoft, like I said, as another security vendor, and you can pick and choose.
Okay. Is Avanan a CASB? And maybe you could explain what a CASB is for
Sure.
Some people are not sure.
Yeah, so that's a term that Gartner came up with, a CASB, a Cloud Access Security Broker. And in fact, for a long time, that was the way you secured your cloud. Typically, they were a proxy in which you reroute traffic. Today, more of them do offer some of the API capabilities to connect kind of in the same way we do. So CASB is essentially a subset of what we do. So CASBs look for shadow IT. Yes, we do that. They offer some level of DLP, typically kind of an inline DLP. We do a kind of a cloud context DLP. So yeah, there's some overlap there. So if you are looking for a CASB, you have a need for what CASB offers, you should definitely take a look at what we're doing, because not only do we offer all those capabilities, but typically we offer it in an easier deploy method because we do eliminate the proxy, but also because we can offer a greater security stack.
Okay. Another question that came in is, do I need to have all these tools in my data center? And I assume that the question is about, all the things that you're sort of turning on, through Avanan.
That's a good question. So you may not have a data center. In fact, a lot of our customers are 100% cloud. But the key thing is that no, you do not need to have anything deployed in your data center, none of these tools at all. We have taken these tools and created cloud-based versions of them, and they run headless within our environment. So we take care of the deployment, we take care of the scaling. So large company, small company, busy morning, lazy afternoon, we scale the machines. We also handle all the licensing. So you pay per user per month, and don't worry about the licensing of the security on the back end. We take care of all of that invisibly to you.
Interesting. Okay. You know, and I guess this one's a question for me, but the slide that you had about the graphic with the multi-technology scanning and how much more effective it was when things were layered together. Are there a couple of elements that you find are sort of a best practice in terms of your customers and what they tend to turn on and have the most success with?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. One, typically they come to us to solve their phishing problem, the attacks coming in via email, in which case, almost at a minimum, anti-phishing tools, a signature-based antivirus, a sandboxing at a minimum, and then, of course, they can see the value of some of the new cutting-edge malware capabilities, malware detection capabilities. So that is usually kind of the minimum criteria. For data leakage or data classification, that used to be a minimum requirement for anyone that was in a regulated industry. But the truth of the matter is, because of the risk and people inadvertently sharing either proprietary data or confidential data, credit cards, because that's so easy to do, it's actually becoming kind of the new minimum requirement for even small businesses or businesses that don't fall under some sort of regulation.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Let's see. We've got another one from Quack here. Any safe environment when opening files in quarantine, and with what permission?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that goes into how we work. Typically, the way security companies quarantine is that they move the file into an entirely different environment. So they keep it within a server or keep it elsewhere. What's nice is that we're able to quarantine in place, and that is a file's in place. We can immediately remove the share permissions so that it doesn't need to be moved. And then, of course, if it needs to be recovered, it can be done instantaneously, scanned. We also offer file sanitization, for example. So we might quarantine the file in place. We can convert it using file sanitization in place and then share it. So it's a much more transparent process and actually works within the cloud rather than and I think this is the key thing, is mixing all of your quarantine files into one directory that may be not within your environment.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we've run through most of the questions. There are quite a few here that are pretty specific, and I think you guys will be answering people, one-off, or providing individual answers. And actually, we've got one more that's just popped up here. Let's go ahead with this one. With Avanan, do you have to license all your users in Office 365, or can it be activated selectively on certain important users?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, and we actually do have a case of that in which we're deployed in a large environment. They have hundreds of thousands of users, but because it might be one Office 365 account, for the company, it actually is multiple business units, and this business unit has decided to deploy us, but the others have not. So absolutely. So the business unit with these 10,000 or these two, we can deploy and license for those, and essentially ignore the rest. So absolutely, that's built into our infrastructure because of the way most SaaS are deployed and businesses are actually structured.
Okay, gotcha. Well, super. Michael, do you have any closing thoughts? Any takeaways for our audience?
Well, first I'd like to thank everyone for taking the full hour. We actually had a lot more questions we didn't get to, so we'll follow up those individually. And I appreciate it. I think this is securing the cloud is a real problem that no individual company can solve, and I truly, truly believe that the only way to solve the problem is to get the best of the industry working together to do it.
Good tip. Yeah, and great information. Really interesting topic. Just as everybody's sort of shifting over to the cloud, all these nuances are emerging, and it's a tricky but definitely addressable problem. So thanks for all the insights.